It's your fish gal pal here. Let's get to it. This is what my first year in saltwater taught me. So first, research what sort of fish and corals that you want and pick your tank size from there. Most tanks require a minimum of 75 gallons, and that is a rectangle shape because they like to go back and forth. And also, the larger the tank, the easier it is to keep it stable. So that's one really good benefit and important when you're dealing with marine life, and most marine life needs a larger tank. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And I want you to also remember, don't cheap out here. You want the protein skimmer. And the reason why is the protein skimmer separates the protein, obviously, from the water by blowing little air bubbles in it. And it also aerates the water too. And it removes all that gunk from your aquarium. And that way green hair and cynobacteria doesn't build up in your aquarium because that's what it feeds off of. And then you won't have algae outbreaks for the most part. So keep that in mind and don't cheap out on that. Mine was only $160, I believe, and that was for 100 gallon. So that's a really good price, and it was totally worth it, and it keeps your water crystal clear, so, and it aerates it. So that's another thing. There's no need for air stones in a saltwater tank. The micro bubbles actually are really bad for marine fish gills and also for your corals, so that's something to keep in mind. And also, if you can see that power head right here, it is creating water movement at the surface, so that also aerates my water. And the whirlpool effect, any water hitting on the rocks also creates like surface tension, so that also aerates your water. So you don't need an air stone, and you're not being cruel, so just remember that. And then also, I want you to look into a sump. Obviously, I do not have a sump. I felt more comfortable with internal filters. It's just what I've known. But I change my stuff every 3 to 4 days, so that's something to think about. I have a lot of maintenance to do on my tank, but I really enjoy it, so that's no issue for me. Now, where a sump is, what it would be is, excuse me, like a little separate tank at the bottom, and you could put like macroalgae in there, but if you want to do that, you'd need a light. So what that is like things like seaweed, Cheeto, stuff like that, and it eats up your nitrates and your phosphates naturally, which is really nice. And also, if you have a sump, you have a lot more room for your filter media, so you wouldn't have to change it every 3 or 4 days like I do. So in my filters, I run matrix, not matrix carbon, just regular matrix. And you never have to actually like remove it and put it in the garbage and refreshen it. It's good for life, and it will absorb your nitrates and ammonia and all that jazz, and if it gets scuzzy, rinse it off. I also use Seachum Phosguard, a Seachum Phosguard pad, sorry, and I like cut it to my filter because they're, obviously you can see right there, and right there my filters. Those are the filters. That's my double power head there. That's really powerful. So yeah, so I use filter floss as well, and I also use Seachum Phosguard because I have had issues with green hair algae and cyanobacteria, which has been so much fun. But don't worry, because I'm winning, and it isn't that bad. So, yeah, so that is something to think about there. I do recommend looking into a sump. I like what I'm doing, but it isn't for everyone. So yeah, let me read my little note here, make sure I'm at the right spot. So next we're going on to the lighting. So you need to figure out what corals you want. But then again, I got a black box light. You can see it's pretty bright. Lights up my whole tank there. And it's good for pretty much any coral. It was $160, $170 with tax, so that's pretty good. And it's a great size for my tank because my tank's 27 by 27 by 27, so it's obviously a cube. So I want you to look into the best lights for 20 to 21, figure out what's in your price range and what you want them for, because if you want a fish only tank, you don't really need the same lighting. But if you do want coral, keep in mind you do want quite intense lighting to keep them alive. So talking about coral, they require calcium and alkalinity supplements. Sorry, excuse me. It's late when I'm filming this. I should have filmed this a little bit earlier. But, so yeah, so what I use is Reef Complete, and it keeps your calcium intact, and it also keeps the strontium in your tank intact, and the magnesium, which is also important. Both of those, along with the calcium. So that keeps it all intact, and, you have to watch your numbers to know how much to dose. So that's something to keep in mind. Also for the alkalinity, what I do is I bake baking soda at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour, and that brings it to sodium ash, and then I put it in an airtight bag. A lot of people like to mix it straight up with RODI water, because if you mix it with salt water, it'll evaporate and it won't be the right consistency. But I like to have my airtight bag powder, and I mix up 7 grams when I want to raise my alkalinity by 1. But that's for an 85-gallon tank. So if you want to look at a formula, look that up for Reef calculators for baking soda. Now, if my pH was 8.1 or higher, I'd use just regular baking soda, not baked baking soda, because baked baking soda raises your pH quite a bit. You don't want it to get too high because it's not good for your corals, but baking soda doesn't raise it. It actually lowers it slightly while raising your alkalinity, so that's something to think about. So just keep that in mind. So now we need to talk about sand. You need about 1 pound per gallon, but you can go sandless. But if you go sandless, you're going to need more rock. And rock is quite expensive. So rock, you want about 1 pound per gallon as well. And this is going to help with your biofilter. And it is also going to help, I'm so sorry, with your pH. I knew that and then I blanked. It's going to help you with your pH and keeping everything stable. So it's important to have, but you don't need to start off with 1 pound per gallon because that's quite expensive. So if you start out with like a smaller amount and then just keep adding, that's what most people do. So just keep that in mind. So next we want to talk about, you're going to need an RODI. I got the Geek Pier one off of Amazon. It was like $200. It was great, but you don't want an RO, you want an RODI. And also, some people will use distilled water. I don't. And some people do use tapped water. I really suggest against it, but if you're going to use it, make sure you prime it. Same with distilled water, I'd prime it as well. And then obviously add your salt, but I just wouldn't use it. I'd use RODI water, and you can get it at most local fish stores, so keep that in mind. Marine animals need water that is like 99.9% pure. They can't have like the things in our tap water in it, so that's something you gotta think about, and prime can't really completely take out everything that you need out, so. And also, it will promote algae growth if you use tap water, so you gotta think about that. So the next thing I want you to think about is finding salt that works for you. So if you're doing a reef tank, you would definitely need like a complete reef salt, but if you're doing a fish only, you don't need the same sort of salt. I like to use the Fritz Reef Complete salt. I really like it. Works great for me. So another thing I want to hit on is don't remove corals that die, because if they're given the correct parameters and perfect lighting, well, perfect parameters and the correct lighting, they will come back to life. And it is great. So keep them in your tank. But if an anemone dies, get it out ASAP. And then do a 50% water change and run carbon quick. Alright, so what I also would like you to think about is to wait 3 months before you get coral. Hard to do. I didn't do it. But here's the reason why. If you do get an algae outbreak, you can black out your tank for a few days and then it's gone. Like that. You can't do that if you have coral. So keep that in mind. And when your tank is new, you're going to have algae outbreaks. So you might want to wait 3 months before the corals. And also, they'll thank you and you'll thank you because your tank will be stable and nothing will die. Hopefully. And then, I want you to wait 6 months before the anemone. Even if you do, it's still like possible it'll die if the parameters kind of get out of whack. They need really constant parameters. And if they die in your tank, it's a mess. And it can literally destroy everything. And once you get into marine, you're going to notice things are a bit more expensive than fresh, but that's okay. It's worth it. It's worth it. Alright, next, wait to get a cleanup crew until you get some algae growth going. Otherwise, they're going to die on you. They're expensive too, so worth the wait. The test kits that you're going to need is the saltwater API one and the Reef API one if you want to do corals. That way you can know how much calcium you have in your tank and what the alkalinity's at, so keep that in mind. So for my cycle, I use Stability Prime and Pristine, which doesn't even make sense. I really only need to use Stability, but I was still new. But so what I want you to do is test daily until your parameters rise and drop, and then do another 50% water change, or as much as you can. It is a bit more expensive with water changes with salt, so keep that in mind. And then, so once that happens and everything's where it should be, you can get a pair of clowns. Start slow, okay? Because every time that we add a fish to our tank, the ammonia rises. So if you add too many at one time, you're going to have a really bad ammonia spike. And if you get like a few once a week and then, or twice a week, your tank's just going to keep ammonia spiking up. And it's going to have a hard time coming back down possibly. So, and fish might get sick and die, or you might have an outbreak of something. So go slow. And also the tank can't really handle too much just yet when it's new. So the slower the better. And it builds up a better bile load for you. And clowns are the hardiest fish out there. They're awesome. And if you get two, usually small enough, they'll pair up and you have a pair of clownfish in your tank. And they have very interesting behavior. They look like they're going to kill each other when they're trying to submit to the other one. So the female is very aggressive towards the male, and then the male will like shake and he's like, oh, I submit. So it's interesting. They have a lot of personality. So I'll show you my tank real quick. It's my pride and my joy. It's everything you could ever ask for. There's my Zoa garden. My ham coral, it's not doing hot, but you know what? It's gonna come back. Let me tell you that. I have a dragon sulfabia up there by my bicolor blenny, and some Duncan coral and some brain maze coral. The brain maze coral did not come in good, so not my fault. It came in half dead anyways. And the dragon sulfabia, I killed it. It's coming back to life now, so I'm really happy about that. I also have some candy cane coral, which I killed, but it's coming back to life. Yay! So if you ever have green hair algae, do a peroxide dip instead of trying to brush it off with a toothbrush. It does not work, and peroxide dips do. So let me show you the rest. So this is just another view.